Colonel Nic Gauthier joined the Canadian Forces in 1999 and was commissioned as an infantry officer in the Royal Montreal Regiment. Following his graduation, he transferred to the regular component and has since served with all 3 battalions of the Royal 22nd Regiment. Prior to his posting here as VDF, Colonel Gauthier was most recently served as Director of Expeditionary Operations at the Canadian Joint Operations Command. His previous practical policy experience includes service as Canada's Defense Attaché to Ukraine and Kyiv during Russia's full-scale invasion, serving as Senior Analyst with the Privy Council Office's Foreign and Defense Policy Secretariat, and Senior Staff Officer for Operations and Plans at NATO Headquarters in Brussels. Additional command and staff experiences include serving as Deputy Commander of the Combat Training Center, command of the Infantry School, and as Executive Assistant to the Permanent Military Representative of Canada to the Military Committee. He holds a Bachelor of Science from Université de Montréal, a Master of Public Administration from the Royal Military College of Canada, a Master of Business Administration from the Quantic School of Business and Technology. Nic has 2 daughters, Amalia and Clara. He enjoys running, skiing, caving, and rock climbing. Over to you.
Thank you. Enjoy might be an exaggeration, but all right. What I want to talk today about is the concept of deterrence. And I'll start, if you will, with an analogy. We experience deterrence in every day of our lives, mostly in the form of criminal deterrence, because we want to live safe lives. We don't want to be aggressed on the street. We don't want our house to be broken into. So let's take the concept of securing your house as an analogy for deterrence. There's 2 ways to deter. The first is deterrence by denial. So you have your house, you put a lock on the door, you put, if you want, locking windows. If you feel a higher threat, you add bars to the window, more solid locks. And then you shift to deterrence by punishment or the promise of punishment. You use your tax money to fund a police service. You have a neighborhood watch. You add an alarm system to your house, or a fancy one that not only makes a sound and calls the police. So you both play on the difficulty of the task of breaking into your house and the likelihood of severe punishment of breaking into your house. That's how we do it on current deterrence day. The house doesn't care whether someone is trying to break into to steal your things, or it's a misguided teenager who's drunk and trying to get into a house thinking it's theirs, or it's a person in distress that's seeking refuge in a house because there's a wild animal coming at them. In terms of geopolitics, deterrence by punishment and denial is done the same way. When a country threatens or has aspiration to take on territory from a neighbor, that neighbor is incentivized to present itself as a harder target by getting its own armed forces bolstered, seeking allies so that there's an alarm bell of diplomatic consequence that starts ringing. What I'm proposing is that, to go back to my analogy of the person breaking into the house, what if, rather than a generic alarm that just blares whoever trips the wire or tries to trigger any of the sensor of the alarm, once the thief is starting to break into the lock, a synthesized voice calls them by name in their language and say, "Hey, Mark, I noticed you're trying to break into this house. I've sent you a text with some other consideration." On their device, there's a list saying, we note that your getaway car, license blah, 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 at the street corner is waiting for you. We've prepared to notify the authorities, and they should be here based on their current location in this amount of time. However, there is still a significant possibility, Mark, that you're just misguided and that you think this is your house. It's not. And if you walk away right now, we accept to consider this a misunderstanding. And by the way, if you go to the coffee shop on the corner, we've prepaid a coffee for you, and we will call this a day. I would argue that we have the technology to do that for our security right now, quite easily. And it would be much more effective than the generalized approach at criminal deterrence that we take. What I want to discuss today is, what if we do this on a global scale to geopolitics, to create a way to deter aggression between countries by focusing on the people who lead them, not the countries themselves. And that will take me to the first point that I'd like to make, switching out of my analogy. Most of classical deterrence theory developed during the Cold War makes one original assumption, that countries are black boxes. We don't care about how they function internal. We ignore internal politics, internal dynamic. We assume that countries are actors which will act rationally. Most of our deterrence theory comes from game theory, where countries will do what's best in their national interest, will provide for their citizens, will refrain from action that would hurt their citizens, and contribute to their general welfare, and that they won't take actions that would be counterproductive to their territory, their people. I would say that one of the reasons that since 2010 we've seen a failure of classical deterrence is because that model rests on that assumption present in structural realism that countries are rational. When countries act against their own rational self-interest, as we've seen in North Korea, as we've seen in other actions, we assume, they're under a dictatorial regime and they're acting irrationally. I would say that that's one of the things I posit. Those countries are still acting rationally, or rather, the autocrat at their head is acting in a rationally self-interested way, bounded in their own self-interest, which differs from that of the country. And I think that's where deterrence based on, at the country level, fail and has been failing. We should shift away our focus of deterrence, particularly in the case of personalist autocracies, to the people at the center of the state who make those decisions. Because as it is right now, they don't bear the risk. They will not be fighting. They don't bear the consequence of the punishment that we impose on them. Those economic sanctions rarely affect the leader. They rarely affect the elites that support the leader. They affect the people. And the only thing that the leader really cares is about themselves and the people that keep them in power. So we need to personalize the risk to the leader and the people making the decision, so that particularly in a circumstance where the primacy of staying in power means that there will be a loss of control of loss of control of the state is dangerous to the leader personally. War might be an attractive solution to distract from politically sensitive inner turmoil, economic crisis, and it allows for a consolidation of power. So while it may be objectively against the best interest of the state, it could be objectively in the best interest of the leader to embark the state in an adventure that is against its best interest. So, as I was saying, key difference between our structural realist assumption that the state is rational and the reality and practice of autocratic leadership, particularly when there's a cult of personality. Authority is extremely concentrated. The leader cannot survive political defeat. By the time that they've reached that amount of control, their prospects are stay in power or face punishment, often at the end of the people within their own states. So everything becomes existential. Everything becomes a matter of personal survival. And it may become a quite rational gamble to embark the state in a risky business in order to delay or defer the consequence of their personal activities. What I'll spend the next few minutes is presenting the concept that I am advancing, which is the shift from classical deterrence to an individualized, personalized approach to deterrence. First, I need to go over two extremely simple concepts in psychology. The first one being Maslow's hierarchy of need. You'll be familiar with it with your Psychology 101 from late high school or early university. Essentially, the details of it are not particularly important, but what Maslow asserted is that there is a layer of fundamental needs that must be satisfied before we elevate and even start caring after more elevated need. In the case of personal psychology, it goes from like eating, sleeping, drinking, all the way up to self-actualization, meaning that someone who doesn't know where their next meal will come from is unlikely to really care about self-actualization. The theory has been questioned, reinterrogated quite recently, and over the course of its almost 75 years of existence. And while it's been adjusted, in this case, it furnishes a model that's still sufficient for us. Meaning, in my case, if we adapt that to the reality of an autocratic leader, there is a layer to their need. Because their need changes through time and through circumstance, we need to address deterrence, the deterrence package that targets them aligned with those needs. So there is no point trying to provide an incentive to rejoin the club of respectable nations if that person is afraid for regime survival or worse, their own physical survival. So we need to address those anchors so that our appeals, our influence is relevant. The other theory of psychology that applies to deterrence is Vroom's expectancy theory. Vroom's expectancy theory is already reflected in deterrence by punishment and deterrence by denial. What Vroom asserts is that there are two components to something happening. You need to be able to do it, and you need to want to do it. Because it's a multiplicative function, if you're able to but you don't want to, nothing happens. And if you want to a lot, but you're incapable of doing it, it still won't happen. And that correlates directly into deterrence by denial. We want you to not want to do it, or correction. We want you to not be able to do it. And deterrence by punishment, we want you to not do it. The other field of understanding or field of knowledge that I want to borrow from, after borrowing some psychology, is marketing. There has been huge advance in the field of marketing over the last 20 years. There is a reason why your phone knows exactly when you want to buy a new pair of shoes. There is a reason why you go on a website, you don't make a decision, and then when you feel like it, you get an email that says, hey, like there's a deal. You can get a 5% rebate if you do it today on that same pair of shoes. Oh, and by the way, there's all those other alternative choice if you're not ready to commit right now. We have an immense amount of personal data circulating everywhere that is collated. That mass data is interpreted to a level of clarity and prediction that is often better than we understand ourselves. It has literally every data point on us. It's anonymized for privacy reason, but not very efficiently, just to the boundary of legality. Your phone knows where you are. Your phone speaks with your computer and knows what you're viewing, what media you're consuming, what you're expected to. Not only that, it knows who you're related to and what they're interested in and what they're doing and where they're going. Through all that mass knowledge, it's quite feasible and it's quite done for commercial purpose to create an analogous AI simulation of you and to query an A/B test and try out different sales pitch, different strategy for you as an individual to achieve the sale that the company wants to make. What I'm proposing is we borrow three concepts from those technology. The first one is predictive churn. Through your circadian rhythm, the moment that you naturally make your decision, the phase of the moon, whatever influences you, you have set a pattern of when you make decisions. That's why you get those emails at that specific time. The AI knows when you're more vulnerable to make a decision. In grand strategy, it might be because there's your opponent is too much in the media and you need to reclaim some attention space. It may be because you have unfavorable stories coming out that you want to distract from. It could be that it's your birthday and you feel you need to do something significant. It could be an historical event. And honestly, it doesn't really matter what it is because you've set a pattern over time that can be measured and exploited. Other than churn, I'd like us to borrow account-based marketing. So account-based marketing means you don't sell only to the person buying. You approach with different data points that will influence them, the people whom they trust. So in the case of a large sale, let's say you're trying to sell like grippins to the Canadian Armed Forces, you don't only talk to the Prime Minister, you talk to Indigenous group with arguments that work for them. You talk to Treasury Board with argument that works for them. So that when the person is seeking other advice, they're getting honest, truthful opinion, but that has been preceded with facts relevant to them. We can do that too, because whoever is making the decision in any country, they still have spouses, they still have trusted confidants, they still have advisors, and you can build a wall of information around people. The third concept is what is called in personalized marketing ICT, which means identity. You gather as much information as can be publicly found about the person with whom you want to make the sale, building that synthetic simulation of them. Contactability, you figure out all the ways that you can get information to that person. Quite often you can find, because you've given it to them, your phone number so you can get a text because you wanted a 5% rebate, your email address because you got another rebate or more access, or through the cookies. So you've provided a lot of ways that can be piled together, and through different sources you can find direct access or indirect access through other people. Traceability is how all the signals coming that person are coming to you. So their interaction on the web, their buying profile, all the transaction going on their credit cards, and so on. Now, I'm taking the marketing approach for selling you, but it's easy to convert that into state-level data gathering, because not only do all those things happen for important people too, they still have cell phones, they still buy shoes. We also have vast networks of intelligence and collection where we could do targeted search to acquire more precise information to feed our model to a greater level of precision and find other ways to reach them. And we want to be able to reach them because there are three things that distinguish most autocrats from the average rational decision maker. They have three biases. Those biases exist in all of us, but they are particularly present into autocratic leaders. The first one is a bias of confirmation. We're all subject to that. We like being right. If you're the leader of a nation, not only do you like being right, but you've surrounded yourself with people that tell you you're right all the time, and really feel personal risk at giving you information that contradicts that impression. So your first bias, a bias of confirmation. The second one, the bias of exceptionality. If you've made it to be the head of state of a world power, you think you're pretty great. Honestly, you're probably pretty great. You certainly know how to work the system. You're probably quite smart, and you haven't failed often in your life. So you've got the lesson that you're probably going to make it through. You're probably going to succeed again. And that leads to your third bias, the bias of formidability, that there really is nothing that can stop you because you haven't been stopped yet. We see that often in the world of insurance. That's the reason why 17-year-old male young drivers have really high insurance premium when they start driving. They've never had a crash yet. They think they'll be fine. They have no experience of personal consequence of any of their decision, meaning they're probably assuming that they can go 140 on the highway and they won't have a crash because all the time they've done that, they've never had a crash. And as you gain experience, your bias of formidability decreases and eventually realigns. So in the case of autocrats, they are being fed information that confirms what they want or what they believe. They are self-deceiving that probably they'll be fine and they just need to keep pushing the envelope until they get what they want, and that'll work out for them. What I'm proposing is that with all the information and the modeling that we got using the ICT approach, we use those tools, those direct access, to give them facts that contradict what they're being fed by their sycophants, that what they're choosing to believe. There is a vast amount of fact that we can pick from. For example, if you're planning to invade, let's say, Ukraine, and your generals are telling you that your armies are doing great, and that there are full of stocks, soldiers have been paid, excellent quality, all the trucks are functioning, we're ready to go. But if we, who's trying to deter them from doing that, can provide a detailed bank account to show that actually a lot of the money went in the general's accounts and not for paying the troops, that their fleet is about 50% in need of repair, that there are shortfalls of food, that the quality of the tires is not great, that satellite imagery that shows them that most of the vehicles are not where they're supposed to be. So there is a huge advantage to using truth and fact and incontrovertible reveals, is that creates dissonance between the autocrat and the people feeding them information. At worst, it creates a lack of or at best, it creates a lack of distrust. But it also forces a reassessment. And because you can predict quite precisely when the point of churn is, maybe that photo of a satellite imagery of proving that some of the assertion that the inner circle has provided is patently false, served directly to the leader, because you've identified how you can contact them, can just nudge them in the right direction to delay or not take the risk at the point of churn. What I'm proposing is that we build systems, teams and software, and to constantly model and adapt those leaders whose countries we depend on for our own national security. By collecting that information, which is in the most part already being collected, we can build precision model of those personalities with predictive preferences, identify the key point of churns, design the deterrence mix, and I'll come back to that, and constantly, rather than only in my breach of your house, so you don't only ring the alarm when someone breaks the lock, you constantly send messages that will stop the person before they come and try to break the lock. There are two things, both tied to deterrence by punishment or deterrence by denial. So the map of pain. Because we understand the leaders better, we can make sure that the punishment that we threaten to impose actually affect them. Rather than blanket embargoes that generally are making the least fortunate members of society suffer, we can target immediate consequence to the leaders. What if they get a text with their secret bank account in Switzerland and the full account number? It brings the threat of an embargo much more precisely. What if it's the location of their really, really cool super yacht and we're planning to take it away from them? Or the revoking of the visa of their illegitimate daughter who's studying in London. There's all those elements of personalized action that don't affect the country, but affect the leader themselves or one member of their elites, which we consider their account, so that they lean on the leader. So, like, where the pains must be felt depends of where they sit on that adapted Maslow pyramid of need. If they're in a state where they feel for regime security, we need to guarantee that regime security, which equates to their own personal safety, is guaranteed so that some of those hooks matter. And we play and adjust the mix of potential punishment based on where they are in their real world. Best next offers are a way to give them what they would need war for through another mean that doesn't damage our own security. So if they're incentivized to start a conflict because they need to distract from a crisis at home or to consolidate power, we can offer them additional security guarantees so that they feel safer at home. We can provide, if they're at the higher end of the pyramid and they seek to increase their legacy and history, we can set up circumstances where they are invited to a summit they normally wouldn't be, or given a prize they normally wouldn't be, in order to hit them on what they need at that particular time. If we take the example of Napoleon, after the Sixth Coalition War, which took him from power, after the fifth one he came back into power because he didn't really have anything to lose. And he was quite afraid of being killed by his opponents. So the promise of an exile as the best next offer and posterity was sufficient to keep him from getting re-involved after that. I used the model and tried to apply it to Russia, and more specifically to its president, Vladimir Putin. And you'll have probably noted these examples throughout my speech, but one of the key things that seemed to have completely not worked in our attempts to deter prior to the 2022 invasion is the constant focusing on Russia rather than focusing on Vladimir Putin. His elites were starting to challenge his authority before he invaded Ukraine. A military defeat would be catastrophic, but an economic defeat would be worse because his elite would turn against him, strip him of power. And if we look at what happens to his predecessors and his predecessors' predecessors, it's reasonable for him to assume that it wouldn't be a nice, quiet retirement, as we would expect in a functioning democracy, where if you're the prime minister or the president and you don't win the election, generally it's not a bad thing. Like, you got out of the world's most stressful job, you write a book, you make a ton of money, you're invited to conference, people still respect you, you're an eminent person, and you have a nice follow-on life. If you're a autocratic dictator, generally, if you're lucky, you run away to somewhere else with a lot of the money you stole, or you get jailed, or if you're even less lucky, you die. So there's a lot of incentive to hold on to power by whatever means necessary. And starting a war generally gives you grounds for eliminating rivals, consolidating powers, purging generals, or at least keeping them busy doing something else than doing coups. So we need to de-incentivize that, which is what I'm proposing here. I'm putting constraints on this, which you would expect. We need to preserve international laws and norms. I'm not proposing that we justify, there is no world police. I'm not proposing that we justify actions against the leader themselves that would be kinetic in nature, regime change, or assassination. We need to ensure the stability of the geopolitical balance sheet with leaders that feel that they're safe. In fact, personal safety is number one in this. We are much more interested in showing them how much more advantageous it can be to maintain the peace equilibrium than to challenge it. So there has to be a certain guarantee of security. The second one is, for very self-interested reason, we are much more effective when we use truthful argument. You don't fight disinformation with more disinformation. You fight disinformation with facts, irrefutable facts. Even better, facts that the people that you're trying to influence can verify independently. So if you want to provide elements of an argument that challenge the rationale on which they've been operating, that they've been fed by their inner circles, but that they can verify and then have to recalibrate, change how they think, and come up to a different conclusion, the conclusion that you want them to take, which is that peace is a better option. The third one is interesting. What I'm proposing seems extremely invasive in privacy. We're wondering, is it ethical to do so? I would argue not only is it ethical to preserve peace using that, but it's certainly more legitimate to prevent prevent war than to sell shoes. And we're already using all those tools quite safely, and we feel quite legitimized to do so when it is for profit-making purpose in industry. It is quite acceptable, I would argue, to do so to assure global stability. What we need to make sure of that is that there are guardrails, that there is oversight, that when you use tools, particularly advanced intelligence gathering tools, to get information on world leaders, you are seeking proper authorization, that it can't be then turned inwards to do the same thing for internal political opponents, and that you don't try to shape behavior in order to bypass democratic process. But not acknowledging those risks don't make them go away. You just need to make sure that the guardrails are there because those tools already exist. We've seen them in the Cambridge Analytica scandal in the UK. We've seen them in the investigation of the Russia influence on American election that was investigated by Mr. Mueller. Those elements, those capability, that technology exists. Supervising it is the only way to keep it in check, not ignoring that it is not there. And as I come back to my house from the earlier element of my talk, the point is not to to limit our tools of deterrence to the only two elements that affect the wider population. It's to focus their efficacy, focus our effort, focus our collection effort, our analytical effort on the people who can do most harm, and not remove them from power, understand them so that their choice is then to do least harm. We can't rely uniquely on people's morals that they will choose to do less evil and more good, but we can steer them that way to align their self-interest back with the self-interest of their nation, and ideally the self-interest of that nation with global self-interest for a safe and stable world. And on this, I'll turn it back to Martin for questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions?
Uh-oh. Yes.
So the model. Can't
Wait.
We're streaming this as well.
That is a very strange microphone.
Yes, it is a very strange microphone. So the framework you've laid out here involved a lot of data and big data analysis stuff. If I do not have a lot of high quality data, or if I am not confident in my ability to model that data, does your framework still make sense for me to employ?
So it brings us to kind of the traditional advertisement / psychological operation challenge. You can do a very wide campaign that addresses everyone. It will be moderately effective because you can, like, everyone's particular differences averages out. And the more you segment your target audience, the more accurate it can be. So, like, if I try to target this entire room, I will come up with a solution. I can test it, see if it works. If I decide to segregate by age band, I'll get better. Age band and gender, I'll get better. Age band, gender, and profession, I can assume that there are more commonalities. And the more I segment, ideally down to one person, the more accurate I am. The better the data, the better the result. But a lot of data is like what we, what in marketing is called data exhaust, traces that you abandon in the environment in the functioning of your normal activity. So all your bank transaction, all the location data on your phone. If you supplement that, if you're a person of vital interest to a country, like a foreign leader, with all the data that we can further collect through intelligence work, you can build a very, very specific model of a person. You have everything they say, everything they tweet, everything they put out in the information environment, everything that they've said in any public setting, a lot that they've said in private settings. You can actually build quite a detailed amount of information. And I would argue, even the kind of, with accepting all those kind of specialized collection activities, all like just the data that like I leave as a consumer is enough that the modeling that tries to sell me thing is successful most of the time. Like there are vast amount of that like exhaust that we put just by existing. We just need to collect it, integrate it, use software, but also people to try to test that. And one of the key elements of marketing and testing is you're not looking at only one moment where you need to give the right answer or the right stimuli. I will bombard you with stimuli multiple times a minute. It's called A/B testing. I'll show you something. It won't work the way I want. I'll show you something else. If that works, then I work myself down my decision tree, and I know you like that font better, or that color better, or this time of the day better. And I do it for small, unimportant stuff until I need something important, and I can do it again. So you don't have one chance at this. You are constantly doing it. And about the leaders themselves, but their inner circle. And we are in a data-rich environment where we don't need to target people as like vast groups anymore. We don't need a wide campaign to influence a purchase. We can go slightly differently to everyone and achieve the same effect. What I would like us to see in the deterrence world is opening up. We don't stop deterring it as we are currently doing, deterring countries. We also start deterring individuals who have inordinate amount of influence.
Thank you for the conversation. So I would try to make my comment from personal to the state leader. So in the case of being bombarded with like ads, say on Instagram, for example, how do you factor in the agency of the person to recognize the pattern and then be dissatisfied with the whole target in itself rather than just like the specific decision? So I see continuous ad for something and then I just block that advertiser together so they don't have access to me anymore. So now in the case of the leader, how do we factor in the agency of the leader to recognize the pattern of, that, okay, we are targeting you to make this specific decision, even though it's not one time, but like over a period. So how do we factor in their agency to recognize the whole pattern of, okay, they're trying to make me buy this thing, but what if they don't buy it because of their agency?
So it's a traditional kind of counter argument to advertisement that like once you recognize that it's being done, it works less. But like studies have proven that even if you're super aware that you're being marketed to, if you're being marketed well, it's not because it's trying to make you do something you wouldn't naturally do. It's recognizing and elevating a need you already have. So in marketing or in politics, we're not trying to change their mind. We're trying to provide a match between needs that they have and a solution that suits our need. So if it's done well, being aware that it's done, that you are being influenced, won't diminish the efficacy of the program.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I think I want to take psych as the major now. But my question is, what stops these autocratic leaders from using the same tools on, let's say, democratic leaders? And then more so, if these leaders are, voted in democratically, can we use these tools, or where do we draw the line? Which leaders not to use them against and which to use them against?
So it's a great question. I think in a way, this only works if you don't democratize your decision-making cycle. So democracy in itself becomes the shield to it. Like if you try to influence a democratically or a leader functioning in an effective democracy, whether they're like affecting their own self-interest doesn't work. They are bound by a set of rules, of checks and balances, of responding and being accountable to the people that elected them. So those leaders, like foreign powers, are already trying to influence our people, are already providing information and disinformation to achieve the effect they want. Like through bot farms, through everything, they're trying to influence us, the public. They're most definitely trying to influence the leaders themselves. We tend to focus on the wider issues, or to see this as like unethical, that people must have free will preserved. If free will still exists, it's not a it doesn't exist in the absence of truth. It's a contested battle space where you need to provide your truth constantly. I would say, just to answer specifically, I think democracy protects you from this working. And if then you democratize your decision-making process, then we've also succeeded, because we've distributed the power, the decision-making power of the leader, and then we can fall back on traditional deterrence to deter based on national interest. Did that make sense?
Thank you, Colonel, for your presentation. Thank you, Colonel, for your presentation. So my name is Axel Mouffron. I'm from France. I'm an alumni of IHEDN. And I was wondering, like, following the previous question, if you would say that transparency would be the most effective tool to oppose the I would say, bad use of the AI and individualized deterrence against democratic regimes. Would you say that it could be an efficient tool?
Yeah, transparency, truth, like what I mean is that we need to get through that self-reinforcing bubble of self-deception. And like generally, when we looked at conflicts, like the rational sum total gain on a national level is generally a lose-lose for everyone. It is generally an error of like estimation at the onset that leads to like the decision maker to think, oh, that will be good because of this. If you know when they're making that decision through your ability to predict churn, and you can provide like a rational counter argument as to why it won't lead not only to their nation state aim, but their own personal goal. And I think like that's where like there is a fundamental difference between democratically elected leaders in functioning democracies and autocrats, is that there is an incredible amount of distance that builds between their personal interests, like accumulation of personal wealth, personal prestige, self-preservation, that doesn't exist in democratically elected leader. Like there is a much higher correlation between the interest of the nation and the interest of the leader in a functioning democracy where the leader has no like real life or death circumstance of losing power. It won't mean ruin. It won't mean loss of privilege. So by assuring that those facts reach the leader, then yeah, transparency, truth gets us what we want.
So two questions. One is, how are you so confident that facts will work? If the circle around the autocrat has developed into a thick enough layer, wouldn't there be a response or a deflection or something like that? And two, because I'm assuming you've probably red teamed this in your own mind, like what's the response? Either from the autocrat or from that circle.
Yeah, so that's why I put the emphasis on independently verifiable facts. So, like the provision, so the reaction to the leader themselves is either to introduce doubt in the relationship with their close advisor, at which point there's a net benefit to us, or seek validation, which gains time and then confirms that from the inner circle whose like credibility is being challenged. I expect, like as we've seen, like a loss of favor, a diminution or friction, and that also encouraged them to edge their bets and distance themselves from the leader. So we're in a cycle where we create a layer of friction between the leader themselves, and like the leader can't, like even if they think they do or they want to, don't actually control the state directly. They need the cooperation of those elites. So friction through them is a net benefit to reducing the efficacy of an aggressor power. At the same time, through the concept of account-based marketing, like you also target that inner circle, and you show how many of, like if we take generals purge, how many previous general in the Communist Party have suddenly lost favor and had a fatal accident. You're probably next. And by the way, we've this fact that you've hidden is now public knowledge. So it forces everyone to edge their bets and to abandon the illusion of their own self-comforting delusions. Did that answer?
Yeah, the first one.
Okay. So the element of response, I think what happens when you successfully prove that that circle of delusion is wrong, and you provide facts, they verify them, they've lost confidence in that person. I think they get rid of that person in their inner circle, and then everyone else is a lot more nervous, and you create internal dissent, and the state now shifts away from its problem, or as new problem to focus on rather than invading a neighbor.
Yes, that's true.
You mentioned the use of some very personal or private information in deterring leaders, like bank accounts, like illegitimate children. How do you sort of deliver this information to the leaders you're trying to influence without either making it public or shocking them too much and keeping them to keep listening to you?
So those same type of tools through which you find that information can find you access or other channels of communication, be they diplomatic back channels or private phone numbers, private email accounts, address. You can the imagination is kind of your only limit there. If you want to get a message to someone, there are always ways to do so, but finding those is also a work of information and intelligence collection. But we cultivate those networks through all sorts of ways. Studying abroad, you make contacts, you make network. The assistant during the formal talks, exchanging papers while the principals have their official conversation in camera, is how we pass a lot of non-official information. So once you want to share information, you can find a way, you can target it. It can be technological or it can be super analog and in person. Yes.
Okay, we have one online question from Amy Doyle. Just as in marketing and sales, sometimes you do change minds. And in this context, we likely can't change the despot's mind, but we can attempt to change the minds of their followers. I'm thinking about the brainwashing of the Cambridge Analytica type stuff. So any thoughts on how we unbrainwash the followers in the day of social media?
Yeah, so I've my time in Ukraine kind of made me think about Russia a lot. And one of I was looking for there's a lot of really good work done by Ukrainian civil society groups who reach back out into the Russian kind of social media and expose facts and provide reach out to their family and try to influence and say, hey, are you aware we're actually at war here, and break through the controlled information environment of Russia? And I always struggled with understanding why. And through my time here at Queen's, I was introduced to a philosopher that I didn't know of, Gramsci, who elevates the willing apathy for security reasons of oppressed people. It became dangerous to think critically. If you're in the Soviet Union or modern day Russia, you've internalized the fact that just going along with the flow and not being the blade of grass that stands out is your best personal bet. So I would say in response to the question, de-brainwashing the people is too disadvantageous for them. Like they shift to a movie, like waking up from the Matrix is not good for you. Like it attracts a lot of personal problem for you. You may not like the system. You may not like actively support it, but just doing your own little thing, hoping it'll collapse on its own or that someone else will do something is in your own self-interest. So focusing on the people in this case is too dangerous for the people. We put them in a situation where the cost of opening your eyes or of presenting a dissenting opinion is too dangerous. And I think that vision that Gramsci proposes explains a lot of like why do the people of North Korea not stand up? There's literally millions of them and only one dictator. They could easily do something about it. But there's a climate of mutual fear, paranoia, like self-surveillance, where taking action is just plain too dangerous. And I think that's repeated in most societies where like it is present in everything. That's why there's a distanciation from political process in pretty much every type of government, but it is to a whole new level or a formidable level in autocracies that have powerful repressive tools.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, please join me in thanking Colonel Gauthier for his presentation.
Thank you.